Hello, and welcome to the AzureWell Podcast, where we're talking about how to restore health naturally. I'm Susan Booth, and today we're going to be talking with Dr. Alphonzo Monzo about healthy weight management. And Dr. Monzo, you have already given us a lot of podcast information about a variety of different subjects. But January is typically the time of year when people start, looking at, well, what shall I do about my weight? And pretty much, we're not at a spot where we can tell people how to lose weight, but we can help people understand how to have a healthy weight. And so that's what we're here to talk about, that and metabolism. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Monzo.
Thank you for having me again.
Mhm.
Yeah, it will be an interesting discussion because of the. I think most people are still trying to figure out why do we gain weight, and there's maybe 10,000 different voices out there that all have their own little ideas, but it really comes down to some very simple principles.
Well, and that's
So,
kind of what we've been told is that, it's calories in and exercise, and that's all it takes. But
that's
I
right.
think that you've got a few more details on that.
Yeah, I think that's probably only half the story.
Mhm.
So we're calling this one Lean and Fit. Healthy weight management and metabolic support. So it's all about that metabolism. So, as normal, we're going to go through root causes of weight and metabolic challenges. We're going to talk about lifestyle to improve weight and metabolism, nutrition to improve weight and metabolism, and of course, what AzureWell supplements you could add in to support these things. So when we get to the root causes of weight and metabolic challenges, there's a couple things that you kind of need to know it all. So just bear with us. We're kind of going to throw a lot of stuff out like a shotgun and then, pieces of the puzzle and then kind of put it all together and it will make sense.
Okay.
But number one is nutritional deficiencies, of course. Number two is inflammation. And then we have gut health and bad diet, blood sugar, stress, mental, emotional, poor sleep, and the wrong exercise. So we're not going to tell you to go out and exercise. So there's a reason for that. So we're going to cover a little bit of each one of these as we move along. So how about some medical myths about weight gain? Because you've probably heard things like this. You're fat because you have a stomach, right?
Mhm.
You're eating too much. And so the reason you're fat is because you have a stomach. And what we're going to do is gastric bypass. We're just going to bypass that stomach. And you can see here in the little on the screen where they just put this tube and bypass the stomach and go into the small intestine. Sometimes they do a partial, but most of the time it's a full bypass. And of course, I think it doesn't take much for anyone to realize that this is probably not a very good idea, considering how much the stomach breaks down. And it's like, what's doing all the breaking down of food now? Well, a part of the body that's really not equipped to do that. But the idea of this is you're going to be full more because you don't have this big empty sack to fill up with food. So you don't have to put much food into you before your body's sending you signals that you're full. So the idea is to get you to stop eating so much. That really didn't work so well. So they came up with another method. The gastric band. How about this one? Same idea still. It's still you're fat because you have a stomach and the stomach's the problem. So what happens if we just made the stomach a little bit smaller? And we put this band around it so that way when you eat, you get full faster and then you won't eat as much. Still not a good idea. And that metal being there in the body is not a great idea for the energy systems and for energy circulation. So turns out that really doesn't work. And sometimes those bands break and have caused a lot of damage internally with lacerations. So that's not something you want. Well, now they have something new. And this has been something in the news a lot, right? It's the GLP-1 drugs. So that's glucagon-like peptide 1, which I find really interesting because the FDA has a big move right now to try to ban a lot of peptide therapies. Of course, if they're natural, they want them banned for some reason. But if it's a synthetic drug that's using a peptide, that's okay. And of course, everyone knows the big name up here in the top. I don't know if we're really supposed to say that name or not, but you know what it is. And so this is an injection, and it's using this hormone-like peptide. It's a synthetic version, and that specific drug is actually using glia monster venom to create this GLP-1 drug. And what happens is that the glia monster lives out. It's a big lizard. It lives in the desert, and there's not a lot of food all the time for it. So this synthetic peptide it makes, and its venom controls and greatly reduces your appetite, the appetite of the lizard. So the lizard doesn't have to eat that much. So we're going to talk more about this GLP, and you're going to see that's a very similar reason why they're using it. But I put on the screen this screenshot from Wikipedia because I was looking more at this hormone peptide, and I was like, oh, this is very interesting. It has a word there that most people would skip right over, amidation. So this peptide goes through amidation and proteolytic cleavage. Now, most people have no idea what amidation is, and they skip right over that. Well, that's a PAM enzyme reference.
Oh.
PAM zyme. And this is the reason why no one says the whole name for PAM.
Mhm.
Peptoglycine A amygdalating monooxygenase. That's a tongue twister.
You did good.
Not bad, huh? Obviously, they call it PAM for short. But look what this says. A highly conserved copper-dependent enzyme. Copper-dependent.
Wow.
We review data indicating that genetic reduction of PAM expression and mild copper deficiency in mice, and then looks what it says, it alterations in physiological functions and neuropeptides, thermoregulation, that's like heat, seizure activity, and anxiety-like behavior. Isn't that all interesting? Kind of sounds like some of the other talks we've been talking about on how copper affects the brain. But what's interesting is this PAM enzyme is essential for the synthesis of all amidated neuropeptides. So this is the only enzyme in the body that can turn on and off peptides, and it's copper dependent. And this GLP is one of those peptides that need to be turned on and off with this PAM enzyme. And of course, that's completely copper dependent. So who would have known copper would have been part of the discussion on weight?
Yeah, it's interesting.
So here's the idea. The idea is to help people feel full longer by mimicking the responsibility of a very important hormone called GLP-1. And then, of course, glycogen is a hormone in the body, but this one is glycogen-like peptide 1. Your body naturally produces this peptide, and a lot of it is produced in the intestines by these L cells. And so these are the things that we know that it helps to do. It helps manage blood sugar, and that's why the main function of this drug was for blood sugar, was for diabetes. And then people realized it controls appetite, and it can regulate stomach emptying. So food stays in the stomach longer and makes you feel full. So it stops it. The problem is since this is a synthetic venom peptide, really, from the glia monster, is it starts to paralyze stomachs in people. So there has been a lot of side effects with people using this drug, with their stomachs becoming paralyzed. And one of the really negative things about using the drug is a lot of people, even when they get off of it, they have severe digestive and stomach issues for up to 2 years after getting off of it, because these peptides are all over the body and they get stuck in receptor sites, and it's really hard to get these synthetic peptides out of the body. But it begs the question, why are we making a synthetic one when the body can make it itself?
Mm.
Well, I think we know the answer, money.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not a safe and effective method of losing weight.
It sounds like the three things all together that you've talked about are all just trying to put less into the body. So, it's made to either bypass the stomach or make the stomach feel smaller or make it feel full faster. It's all what's going in and trying to regulate that.
Yeah, it's all a manipulation of basically the same thing, and that is minimize the amount of food you're eating.
Yeah.
Now, this is very interesting because it turns out that the number one cause for gaining weight and not losing weight is we eat too much. And we overeat and we eat the wrong foods. But the problem is, why? What's the cause of that? It's not because you have a stomach. So, I know. It's because you have bad genes, right? Well, guess what? They've been saying that for years and they still have not found the fat gene. So they keep finding genes that they say, oh, these might be related and might have something to do with gaining weight, but they still have not found a fat gene. Another one is you're fat because you're not working out enough. Well, that's not a great idea either, because if you work out too much, you will burn through your nutrients and then burn up your muscle. Well, you will burn muscle more than fat, and we're going to explain that here in a second. So some simple truths about weight gain. Wrong foods and overeating. Okay, that is the number one reason when they boil it all down, and we've done all these different experiments. But what's interesting is you go back to things like concentration camps, Holocaust, all these types of events where people were imprisoned. What do you notice? They all become really, really skin. You really don't find fat people when they're isolated like this. And what's going on? They're not eating. So we know that overeating food and eating the wrong foods is the cause of weight issues. But why do we overeat? And I put up there empty harvest. You could say empty nutrition or empty calories. It's all kind of saying the same thing. Empty harvest was, I believe, a book, and it was all about how factory farm has failed us because most of the factory farming and these big farms that aren't growing organic whole foods are growing foods that have very little nutrition. So they call it empty harvest, where it's the same thing. The real reason we're overeating is because of nutritional deficiencies. So guess what? It's actually your body's innate wisdom here again. The problem is the innate wisdom is doing exactly what it needs to do. When you're eating the wrong foods and you're overeating junk food or food that has no nutritional value, the body still doesn't have what it needs. So what signal is it going to send your body? More food. We need more food because we still don't have our nutritional value.
Mm-hmm.
So the real reason why people are eating too much and overeating is because they're eating food that has very little nutrition and a lot of times is even questionable whether or not it's actually real food. And of course, this is the big thing the Maha wants to go after here with Kennedy. The idea that our kids are being fed absolutely junk food, that kids are not eating real food anymore, and they're completely nutritional deficient. And what is that doing? Well, it's leading to all these diseases, and it's leading to massive weight gain. And it's easy to see now that when I was a kid, and probably when you were a kid, you didn't have a lot of overweight kids in school, not in elementary school. Now, elementary school, maybe half the kids are overweight, probably what we would call obese. And that's not how it should be. And this is the reason. Nutritional deficiencies. Well, there's another really bad problem with eating junk food that's really not food. And that is it causes severe inflammation in the body. And when you have a lot of inflammation, it increases cortisol release into the blood, which then stimulates the body to generate more fat. And then you have too much exercise. Okay, well, why is that? Well, if you're overweight, most likely you have nutritional deficiencies. So if you start working out too much, what are you going to burn through first? Your nutrients. Now, technically, this is something that's probably not talked about much. A lot of people still don't get it, but there's a hierarchy on how your body burns and makes energy. The whole focus, mainly because everything now is ran by allopathic medicine and education, everyone focuses on sugar, right? And the logic here is no matter what you eat, basically it gets broken down and eventually converted into a form of sugar that your body then uses. That's true, but that doesn't mean you should start with sugar. And that's kind of their conclusion. It's like, well, if everything gets broken down into sugar, who cares if you just put more sugar into the body? But that's not really how it goes. And the hierarchy really should be minerals. Minerals is the number one thing your body really needs to make energy. And this goes back to understanding the how your body makes ATP in the mitochondria and the electron transport chain. We need these minerals like iron and copper and magnesium, and there's a few others. Without those minerals, your body doesn't make ATP energy, and it's actually called magnesium ATP, is what your body actually uses for energy. So actually, the first thing our body should be burning is it should be using minerals to make energy. And then next would be fat, and then protein, and then sugar. And that should really be the hierarchy of how your body makes energy. So that's why we need healthy minerals and fats. So let's explain this a little. Nutritional deficiencies equals overeating. So you start continually eating the wrong foods that have no nutrition, which means your body still is hungry because the body's innate wisdom knows it needs nutrients, but it's not getting it from the food. It's getting this cheap, quick, fast source of energy, and it burns it all up real quick. And then you're crashing because you don't have any energy. Your body's still hungry because it still needs the nutrients. So then you eat more food, which is more calories, and then more inflammation, which is driving your cortisol up, making you fatter, and still making you hungry because you still have no nutrition. And then you go, okay, well, now I'm going to work out like crazy because, maybe that's the problem. I'm eating all this food. Now I need to work out more because I'm eating more. And of course, you never fix the first problem. So now you're going to burn through your nutrients really fast. And then your body's going to burn through glucose and then muscle. And we're going to explain that a little bit more. Blood sugar drops too low. So what happens when your blood sugar drops too low when you burn up? Well, your pancreas releases a hormone called glucagon. Didn't we just talk about that? Like the glucagon-like peptides? So this is a hormone your pancreas releases. And when it runs out of that or doesn't want to release anymore, your muscles and liver can convert their stored glucagon back into glucose. Now, when your stored glucagon is used up, the liver and the kidneys and the small intestine and other parts of the body, like muscles, will break down protein and turn it into glucose. So you're basically eating your own tissue. Protein is a tissue like your muscles. And that's why there has been a lot of emphasis on this 30-30-30 weight loss plan, which is not a really bad principle. What their idea is within 30 minutes of waking up, you're supposed to have 30 grams of protein and then 30 minutes of a cardiovascular workout. That's not too intensive. And the reason why they're recommending this, and it's really important to get that tons of protein before you work out, is if you don't have a bunch of protein and you go and you start really working out, your body is going to burn up its sugar and its empty nutrients. And the fastest thing it can turn into sugar is your muscles. So it's not going to burn your fat first. Your body is actually going to burn your muscle first. So now if you're trying to lose fat, this is not a good idea to burn up your muscle. That's the opposite thing you want to do. So over-exercise will burn up your sugar storage and then start burning muscle for fuel. So
Wow.
it's actually better to wait to exercise until you have a nutritional storage and you have a diet with significant protein before you're working out. That way your body has energy to get through the workout and you're actually allowing the body to burn the fat and not the quickest form of energy, because there is a hierarchy here and the body knows it.
And you would think that that would make it so that your recovery time after a workout would be faster, because it seems like if you're breaking down muscle too much, it's going to have a hard time for the body to build that back up before your next workout. And so you're going to feel weaker and you're going to feel sore. And it does. It seems like if you've lost muscle, that's a stress on the body to have to build it back.
Yeah. And you think of you're going to be releasing a lot of acids in the body, uric acid, lactic acid.
Mhm.
And that could also be really hard on the kidneys, because the kidneys have to do a lot with protein. So if you're converting all your protein into energy instead of using protein as the building blocks to build what your body needs, that's not a good thing.
Mhm.
So this is very simple. It comes right back down to nutrition again. Isn't that
Mm.
interesting? So you see a lot. You can see now the half truth in so many weight loss plans. A lot of the plans understand people were overeating,
Mhm.
but they're still not addressing the cause. Because what do? Well, they give you cheap food to eat, or they try to restrict your calories, or it's willpower, or, like we already said, medically, bypass the stomach or put a ban on it, or what's give you this injection. It's not actually addressing the cause, which is why your body wants more food. So it's not necessarily all your fault. Now, there are other things here on this list, right, to improve, because, hey, sleep is really important. So maybe the quality of your sleep is affecting what you're eating and how you're eating. You might not have the energy to make quality food, so you grab something fast.
Mhm.
We already talked about physical exercise being too much. Of course, the 90 essential was up at the top. What about the bad foods? And of course, the really bad foods, of course, are your, uh, I guess synthetic's not the right way to call it, but your highly processed grains, right? We don't want highly processed grains, which basically are not grains anymore. Everything's stripped out of it. All the nutrients are stripped out, and then they have all the fortifying, where they're adding all the synthetics back into it, and it's bleached. And then a lot of it still has what is it, glyphosate, because it's been sprayed, and the what's the protein that everyone can't handle these days? Gluten. Yeah. I'm getting tongue-tied here today. And some people can't handle gluten. Some people seem like they can handle gluten more. I think a lot of the reaction to gluten has been because of all the other stuff they did to the grains, and not so much the gluten itself. But once your body tags something as bad and starts overreacting to it, it takes a while to reset the body so it won't react anymore.
Mhm.
And what about fried oils, or fried foods, really? Well, they're bad because we have all these bad oils, all these seed oils in the bottle that can go rancid. And of course, we have all these fried foods that are really bad. And of course, the sugars, so refined sugars, all these things are really bad for the body. So we really have to cut these things down, because these are the things that have empty nutrition, because they have been highly processed. And then, of course, we could list 1,000 other things like GMOs and all the synthetic sugar products and the dyes, and we can go on and on and on. But basically, if it's not something that you can actually grow in your garden without the use of all kinds of synthetic chemicals, it's probably not real food. Improving detox or elimination. Well, that's a big one. If you're not eliminating toxins, the body has to store them somewhere. And fat is a primary source for the body to store toxins. Now, a lot of people have theorized that that is probably the number one reason why there's a certain type of fat that the Bible says we're not supposed to eat, which is usually not the normal fat that's on meat. It's usually the fat that you have accumulating around your waist and stuff. That's a different type of fat than what you find on your meat. But usually that's probably one of the reasons why that's not supposed to be visceral fat, they call it. That's not supposed to be eaten, because that is where the animal would hold all of its toxins. And that happens with us. So you think a lot of times, a lot of things the body does by its innate wisdom is not pleasant, but it's the body trying to survive. So the body taking on extra weight to store toxins in, or maybe it makes a cyst or a tumor or some type of storage area to store a bunch of junk. So until it's able to actually eliminate it, because the body has to do something with it. And it is intelligent and it's trying to keep you alive. So it's like, let's stick it over there because we can't get it out of the body. The elimination channels are stuck. And of course, there's a lot of research on how many pounds a person actually can carry in their intestines when they're not having normal bowel movements, which is pretty sick to think about. But I don't know what the numbers are off top of my head, but they're astronomical when you hear the numbers. It's like, what?
Well, I guess that does lead to the question of, are we looking for weight loss or are we looking for fat loss? Because yes,
Yeah.
if everything that's in your intestines were to come out, you probably wouldn't lose fat, but you would lose weight. And so there is a difference in weight management, because weight management technically could be even water weight. So you
Yeah,
got water
absolutely.
weight, the contents of the bowel weight, and you've got fat weight, and those are all part of the weight equation.
Yeah, and that kind of comes back into the bad diet with messing with the kidneys, because you start messing with the kidneys and then your body is going to start accumulating more water weight, right? So all these are things they think about. You can lose a lot of water weight, but that's not necessarily fat, although it might make you look a little bit thinner in your clothes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
healing the gut. And we're going to talk more about that, because of if the gut is healthy, then those L cells are going to be able to make your own GLP, which is going to help with weight, improving blood sugar. And we kind of explained why. If your blood sugar isn't right, then you're going to be burning the wrong type of fuel, and your body is going to be always sucking up and eliminating all your good nutrients and proteins and everything else to try to find something to burn. And it's probably not going to burn the bad fat on the body. It's going to go for whatever can be burnt fastest. And then, of course, dealing with mental emotional trauma. Mental emotional trauma can lead to weight because we like to hold on to things. And if you just think about it symbolically, the body really does work symbolically in a lot of ways. If we're holding on to something, we're holding on to something. And a lot of times that will manifest as holding on to weight, as in fat or water or something else.
Mm-hmm.
So all things to address with lifestyle.
Well, and you had mentioned cortisol, and I
Yeah.
think that might go along with the emotional trauma, emotional stress.
Mm-hmm.
Cortisol being something that makes it apparently so that you gain fat, but specifically visceral fat. And maybe you could explain the difference between visceral fat, where it's located and what it does. You kind of touched on that with the fact that that might be where the toxins are stored. But visceral fat compared to subcutaneous fat, which is the fat that's underneath your skin, I guess the visceral fat gives you a beer belly gut, I read somewhere that if women's waist circumference is 35 inches or more, and if men's are 40 inches or more, then that is highly indicative of having too much visceral fat, the kind that, yeah, you're holding on to because it's full of these toxins and the body's trying to sequester them. Um, so, and cortisol, being the stress hormone, is kind of instigating that.
Yes. And cortisol obviously is made within the adrenals, and the adrenals are highly related to the kidneys. They sit right on top of the kidneys. So yeah, visceral fat would be fat that grows and surrounds your organs. So typically, if you ever see people that have those fake big lumps of fat, they show this is what your fat looks like and how heavy it is versus they might hold up a piece of protein or something. Usually the visceral fat is what makes you look heavy. It's what is gathering around the organs. So whereas normal fat that would be found interwoven into the muscles, which actually makes the meat kind of taste better. So a lot of times you'll notice in the biblical commands, it talks about the fat that surrounds the organ. It's not the fat that's in the muscle. It's the fat that surrounds the organ because that's where the visceral fat forms around. And of course, then that pushes onto the skin and makes you bigger and bigger because it's gathering up around the organ. So that's the visceral fat. And that's what we want to get rid of and what we don't really want to be eating.
The other question I had for you was about getting enough sleep. And I understand that a lot of people that are overweight for whatever reason, they have trouble with sleep apnea, not being able to breathe at night. They get machines to try to help them with this, but it makes it so that they can't get sleep at night. They fall asleep during the day because they didn't get sleep at night. And so the very thing that they need to improve, which is their weight, in order to not have that happen, is the very thing that's kind of sabotaging it. And it seems like a catch-22.
Yes. So what they really need is those 90 essential nutrients.
Mm.
So they can start to break the cycle. But now, our last one was brain and eyes, wasn't it?
Yes.
So, and I remember the name I was trying to remember during that, which was Dr. Jack Kruse. And he's kind of making a huge impact all over the internet lately because he's been recently talking about stuff that he has known for years that he hasn't been allowed to talk about. In fact, he even mentioned that he did a TED Talk about 18 years ago and they banned it and it was never released until I think maybe just recently they finally released it. And he was just kind of in the right place at the right time. And he's told a lot of this information to Kennedy, but he has always been big on blue light and why blue light is so bad for you. And having things like these, your blue light blocking glasses, which usually I'm wearing when I'm working in front of the computers and this kind of lighting, because all of our lighting now is blue light and they're doing that on purpose. And his big thing is he's a neurosurgeon. He still does brain surgeries, but he does it very different than most people. He uses all kinds of different full spectrum and red lights during the brain surgery, and he has phenomenal results. But he was very heavy at one time. And I guess I never knew this, but he studied with Dr. Becker. Dr. Becker is one of the first books I read getting into this field way back in 1999, 98. He wrote the book Body Electric, and he also wrote a book, Cross Currents. And he was doing research discovering that the body makes DC energy in its cells. And he was doing research with DC electric on salamanders and growing limbs back and figuring out how electromagnetism affects the body. And he also found out that the body's cells make UV light. So when Jack Kruse, Dr. Jack Kruse, he's an MD, found out that the body makes UV light, he went, well, then the sun can't be bad for you if your body makes it. So he started studying the leptin pathways and how the light from the sun, when it hits your eyes, stimulates hormone production. And he started going out in the morning light every day. And eventually he lost all kinds of weight just by getting out in the sunlight, because how many of your hormones are based on being out in the sun? So I guess we should throw that one on the list too.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like being in the sunshine is going to help, and then being in total darkness while you're sleeping, so you don't have
Exactly.
other lights on while you're sleeping.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's what I was getting to, is you asked a question about the sleep. So that is the key, because one of the other things he found out is most of your melatonin production is during the day when you're in the sun, but the body doesn't release it until the sun goes down and it's dark. So we need complete darkness for the body to release the melatonin, and then we need the sunlight to trigger the body to go back to releasing serotonin for your daytime energy. So if you're around too much of the blue light and stuff, especially before bed, it can really affect how well you sleep. So that's why probably about this time of the day, it's 5, almost 6 o'clock at my time, Eastern time here. So this is about the time, if you're going to be in front of computers and your phone and stuff, you should be wearing blue light blocking glasses to get your body used to, okay, we need to start getting that melatonin production ready and start shifting into sleep mode. And that's why it's a really bad habit for people to be in bed with their phone, because you're going to mess off your cycles, and you're not going to be able to convert and get into that sleep mode. So
Interesting.
little tidbits for sleep. So that's where I would start. Get your 90 essential nutrients and start making some positive changes with light to try to get your sleep better and hormone production. So nutrients, what do you need? Well, you need healthy proteins, healthy fats, so your body can burn the healthy fats that you're eating and convert that into what the body needs, because your body is not going to burn the visceral fat very easily. Okay. And to get the body burning that, you're going to have to provide the things the body wants to burn naturally. So your minerals, your proteins, and healthy fats. And then your body is not going to be burning cheap sugar. A lot of those things will be converted to the proper sugars anyways, but we don't want to start there. It's like, well, just because protein and a lot of these things get converted into a sugar eventually, you don't want to just stick sugar in the body and start with that process. You want the body actually to do the process it's supposed to turn those things into what it needs. And we have to remember, a lot of those things the body actually needs as nutrients to do some type of building or whatever it is that the body's going to use it for. So not all of it's going to be converted straight into energy. A lot of it is used to repair and build the body. Antioxidants are really important. So greens and berries, because they're going to be anti-inflammatory. Of course, copper with a little zinc. We need a little bit of zinc. We want food-based zinc. We don't want synthetic or what we would call inorganic zinc. And of course, copper, because we know copper is very important for all these hormones, and it's very important for that PAM enzyme. Fatty acids like EPAs, that kind of goes along with the healthy fats. Sun for your hormone D and the activation of your A. And that kind of goes back to what Dr. Jack Kruse has been talking about, because a lot of those pathways have to do with retinol and hitting the retina. So retina needs retinol, and retinol is a vitamin A that's mostly found in the animals, and that's why we have the cod liver oil. So that helps that production of a lot of your hormones. It's a whole neural pathway. It's a fascinating thing. I would love to actually sit down with the guy and learn more, because he has some really interesting information I've never heard, shining different lights in people's eyes and watching how the eye changes, and he can tell all kinds of stuff about where you have problems in your brain just by how your eyes respond to different forms of light. It's like there's not a lot of people who understand that kind of stuff.
Wow, that is interesting.
And of course, the last thing for the gut is healthy probiotics and other, herbs and foods that are going to help strengthen and heal the gut, so that your gut can actually make those GLPs.
Mhm.
And I guess I didn't mention it. It was probably a bunch of slides back when we were actually talking about the GLP-1. And that is this month we will have on the AzureWell newsletter. HR has a great article more on that and some different ideas. So some of that was pulled from that article. So you might want to go over and read that on the AzureWell website.
Okay, we'll put a link to it. And yeah, we do have a blog over on AzureLivingWell.com. And that'd be a great place to go check that out for sure.
So now nutrients. All right, basic nutrition. Because everyone's asking, well, how do I get the 90 essential?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's 3 major products to give you the 90 essential, and that is the whole food multi, the Alaskan cod liver oil, and the fova turmeric blend.
Mm-hmm.
So that will give you your 90 essential. And then if you want a little bit extra copper, because you're only going to get about 1 milligram of copper in the whole food multi, then you might want to add 1 core copper, and that will give you the extra copper because most people are deficient in the copper. And it's not toxic for your body. It's when you have the copper in the right place, it does what it needs. So that's why we need a bioavailable form of copper, which is what we have here. Now, there's some other suggestions here. 1 for women and 1 for men. So weight and metabolism support for supplements for women. So we need to balance hormones and we need to take stress off the body. So the first 2 here, adrenaline adaptogen and adrenal food, are 2 ways to take the stress off of the body and support the adrenals. And of course, that's where your cortisol is made. So this is going to help support the adrenals, lower your cortisol, lower the stress, help with hormone production, which is going to help metabolism. And of course, it's going to also give you energy support. Now, the difference is the adrenal food is more for giving nutrients to the adrenals, and the adaptogen is adaptogen herbs, which help balance the body. And that's what adaptogen herbs do. They don't force the body in one direction. They adapt. So they bring the body back into balance. If you're too low, they bring them up. And if you're too high, they bring them down. Now, the other 2 formulas here are more related to the hormone and metabolism function. Women's feminine balance and women's radiant strength. Both of these have different herbal formulas for really promoting hormone balance, weight support, metabolism, and energy levels. Obviously, it's going to help other things like menopause and menstrual cycle and all those kind of things. Radiant strength is a little bit more for the menopause, and then the feminine balance is a little bit more just for your normal menstrual cycles and balancing that.
Yeah, the emphasis being on balance, because apparently when the body is in balance and it has the right balance of hormones and everything, it naturally regulates its own weight. It naturally knows what the optimal weight is if everything else is in balance. So really, when we talk whole food nutrition, we're talking about creating a balance so that the body can figure it out on its own. It's not really forcing the body to do a particular thing. It's just giving it what it wants to be able to do what it knows is right.
Exactly. That's a key word again. We're not forcing the body to do what we want it to do, which seems to be the only real trick in the allopathic medicine, is to force the body into what we want. And unfortunately, that usually only lasts so long, and then you crash. So for men, the first 2 very similar, because these are you could call them really generic formulas, because one is just food for the adrenals, and the adrenaline adaptogen, like I said, are adaptogen herbs. So they adapt to different body types, and they don't force the body. So they're good for men and women. So those 2 basically the same. But then we have men's pro adaptogen. So this is a very specific adaptogen in herbals, specifically for men, and really helping balance testosterone. Because who knows if it's too high or too low. There's a lot of emphasis today on giving men more testosterone. I don't think that's a really great idea. I think we should do things to stimulate the body to make its own testosterone if it really needs it. And, because we don't know. As you get older, maybe it's supposed to decline. We have this idea that, oh, it's declined and that's a bad thing. Well, maybe it depends on your age and your body knows what's best. So we don't want to artificially force your body to do something you don't want it to do. But it also supports muscle support, energy, and weight. And then the last two there are more specific for one's testosterone support for men. That one is a specific blend specifically for supporting the body's natural balance of testosterone and other male hormones, because men also have progesterone and estrogen and all the other hormones. It's just a different ratio. And then we have prostate support, which, as you can imagine, it's for the prostate. And those two together are going to help with metabolism and energy levels, because it's balancing hormones and some of the key sex organs for men. One more. We also have digestive and blood sugar support, since those two areas of the body are so important. And we also have a little bit in here for detox, right? So the first two products here are two different types of probiotics that AzureWell has. One is a multi, so it has pre, post. I think it actually has prebiotics in there as well. So that's kind of a multicultural probiotic formula. And what that means is everyone knows what probiotics are, but prebiotics help, and sometimes they call them, people know probiotics are probiotics that you give the body that are healthy gut bacteria. Prebiotics usually help the body with making its own healthy bacteria, because it's giving you the building blocks. And then post is healthy gut bacteria that can last after a number of processes in the body. So you're not just it's hard to explain it exactly. It's not just running through the body, right? So these probiotics are going to last even after you eat and after other things move through the intestines. So they're staying in there, because sometimes you take multiple or high dose probiotics and half of it just goes right back out into the toilet, and we don't want that. So we want things that actually stay in the gut and help that harvesting of good gut bacteria in there and a healthy microbiome. Next step, advanced probiotics are very similar to that concept. They're kind of more of what we were just explaining. Probiotics that are going to help stay in the gut and really help that microbiome. And then if we're helping the microbiome, we're going to help the gut health. We're going to help reduce inflammation. It's going to help with mood regulation. And of course, it's going to help those L cells then make your GLP-1 hormones naturally instead of injections. The middle one here provides nucleotides from bovine colostrum. So a lot of people know Recover Immune Vitality Complex. This is a phenomenal formula for the immune system. But a lot of people realize that the colostrum is very healthy for the gut, and it also supports those L cells. So here's another way to give the body something to support the natural production of GLP-1. And then we have a couple products here for detox, blood sugar balance, and just good old anti-inflammatory and gut health. 3 Greens Liquid Chlorella. That's a great product for detoxing and supporting the liver phase 1 and phase 2 detox. It's one of my favorite, really. So 3 Greens, it has chlorella and cilantro and parsley. Blood sugar support, as you can imagine, it balances blood sugar. It has cinnamon and a bunch of other things in there to help with the blood sugar balance. And then one of my favorites, I take this product actually every day in my drink in the morning, is a turmeric ginger powder. Now, the turmeric part is anti-inflammatory. It's probably one of the most well-known anti-inflammatory herbs. And then the ginger is probably one of the most well-known herbs for calming and cooling down the gut and the intestines. So both of those together are a really powerful way of cooling down inflammation, especially in the gut, and helping the intestinal walls heal. So there you go. I think that's all the supplements. Yes. So
That's good, because I think when we're trying here at AzureWell to marry together the concept of a whole food diet where you're getting most of what you can from your whole foods, but if there's any deficiency in that, putting some supplementation in there to balance it out, that's important. And then the other thing of getting enough sleep and the whole thing with light. And yeah, it stands to reason that if you're nutrient deficient, you're going to want to eat more until your body feels like it has enough nutrition. So boosting it through more nutrient dense food that you do eat, and then supplementation to fill in whatever gaps to make it so that the body is getting itself balanced again. Sounds like you've got a plan there.
yeah, one more thing to mention on this is why a lot of times companies like Azure Standard, or I remember back in the day when I was first getting into this, we would talk about the health food stores, and there wasn't many around. There's still not many around in my area. There's only like one and two. Maybe only one's really a real family-owned health food store, and the other one's a big name that is questionable whether or not they're health food anymore. But the number one resistance or argument you would get from a lot of people is, I can't afford that organic food. And it's like, well, you really can't afford not to, because if you continue to buy the normal food in the grocery store that's not organic and that is highly processed, it's not going to fill you up, and you're going to eat twice as much eating the junk foods that aren't really foods than actually going towards something like Azure Standard and getting actual real organic foods that are higher nutrients, because those are going to fill you up faster and you actually don't have to buy as much.
Mm-hmm. You make a really good point. Well, thank you, Dr. Monzo. This has been really helpful, educational.
You're welcome. And we look forward to the next one.